This laptop is slow, Windows feels heavy, and the RAM is soldered, so upgrades are off the table. I don't believe in e-waste, so instead of throwing it away, I'm going to do the rational thing, make this machine usable again by installing Linux. Over and over and over again until I find a distro I can actually daily drive and maybe, just maybe, quit Windows for good. And with Windows 10 support ending and Microsoft slowly removing every trick that lets you install Windows without signing away your privacy, diving into Linux has never been more relevant or more trendy. And today's victim, Linux Mint. And this test laptop is a beast running a Core i5-123-5U, a 10-core CPU turbo boosting up to 4.4 GHz, powered by the state-of-the-art Intel Iris Xe, and a spacious 8GB of soldered RAM, and a very spacious 256GB of storage. However, I put an extra 500GB inside just for Linux. And see, the real issue isn't the hardware. Well, maybe except for the 8GB of RAM. With specs like this, performance still feels like it's being held in a chokehold by background services I didn't really ask for, telemetry I didn't consent to, and ads I definitely don't want. Which is exactly why this series exists. Why Linux Mint? Well, because it's designed for Windows users, it looks familiar, and it behaves familiar. It's the perfect introduction to Linux. And don't get comfortable, and stay tuned for future episodes where I intentionally make myself suffer in order to become a true Linux user. For the install, I used Ventoy, mainly because I plan on distro hopping, and managing a pile of ISOs and a bunch of USB sticks without losing my mind seemed like a good idea. Setting it up was painless. I ran the executable, selected the USB drive, and dragged the Linux Mint ISO right in. That's it, no flashing required. I booted into the BIOS, selected Ventoy, and picked the Linux Mint ISO. The installer itself was shockingly simple. Honestly, simpler than the Windows 11 installer. No Microsoft account, no subscriptions, no ads, and no sign-in to continue existing. Partitioning though. Yeah, that was an experience. This laptop has two SSDs, one with Windows and one completely empty, ready for Linux. In theory, this should have been easy. In practice, I had no idea what I was doing. Turns out you need an EFI partition and a root partition, which I didn't know at the time, so the installer very politely yelled at me with several errors at first. Thankfully, my best mate ChatGPT carried me through the process, and once that was sorted, everything just worked. Or at least I thought it did. Wi-Fi worked instantly, Bluetooth worked, trackpad worked, keyboard worked, no driver hunts, no mystery devices, and no ritual sacrifices. Overall, shockingly smooth. Once I was in, the experience was instantly better. Everything felt snappy, apps opened quickly, switching between things didn't lag, and the system just stayed responsive. On Windows, this laptop constantly felt like it was fighting itself. RAM would max out, fans would spin up, and everything would slow down. On Linux Mint, it actually feels like the system has breathing room, not because the hardware changed, but because the operating system isn't wasting resources. For day-to-day stuff, it's honestly great. Browsing feels faster, multitasking feels smoother, and the whole system just stays out of the way. Which is exactly what I want from an operating system. Overall, using Linux Mint on this laptop feels like what Windows should feel like. Simple, responsive, and not constantly in your way. Now, just to be clear, gaming is not the focus of this series, it's just a stress test, a vibe check almost, a quick way to see whether Linux can squeeze a little life out of aging hardware. For that, I chose Counter-Strike 2. It did not work. What followed was 2 hours of terminal commands, Proton version roulette, config tweaks, and enough reboots to legally qualify me as a system admin.
I got this! I got this! I got this!
The game slowly evolved. First it didn't open, then it almost opened, and then I got into the settings menu, and that's where the journey ended. After 2 hours, I gave up. So instead, I installed a safe game, Half-Life 2, a certified classic, a game old enough to vote. And to be fair, it ran perfectly at 60 frames per second, smooth, stable, no issues whatsoever, which is good, because if a 20-year-old Valve game didn't work on Linux, we'd have much bigger problems. Even though Half-Life 2 was the safe choice, I still wanted to properly stress test the system and compare it against other distros, which meant trying some real games. So first, I tried Hollow Knight Silksong. It ran stable 60 frames per second at 1080p and RAM usage never went above 6GB, and that's with OBS screen capture running in the background. For context, on Windows, trying to run CS2 and OBS at the same time was an absolute joke. OBS wouldn't even launch next to the game. But next, I wanted something heavier. An older title, sure, but still demanding enough to be a solid benchmark, so I installed The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and believe it or not, I couldn't get that running either. So in the strictest, most technical sense, yeah, gaming is worse than Windows. But this laptop was never meant to be a gaming machine. I wasn't expecting miracles, but CS2 did run on Windows. This wasn't a deal breaker, it was just a reminder that Linux gaming is better than it used to be, but it's still Linux gaming. I also got a theme installed, the amazing Cappuccine Mocha. I used commands given to me by ChatGPT, but I think that this is a wonderful tool for this exact reason. A few years ago, getting into Linux would have meant hours of digging through forums and documentation to get everything running the way you want, but now it's accessible to everyone. It's a big pro of AI, and it opens the world to gain information efficiently, but it still should be regulated, and for one, not be allowed to steal other people's work in order to create AI slop. But then I decided I wanted to feel more at home, so I customized it differently. Welcome to Linux 95. Earlier, I said I wanted this laptop to dual boot, so I set up Grub in Linux Mint. For anyone who doesn't know, Grub is basically the choose-your-own fighter screen for operating systems. Except, Windows was gone. When I checked the BIOS boot options, Windows had vanished like it was never there. And at that moment, I had a horrible realization. I may have accidentally deleted Windows during my very professional partitioning adventure, so naturally, I had to reinstall Windows. I did this off camera because nobody deserves to sit through a Windows installation in 2025. That is not content, that's a human rights violation. Or at least, that was the plan. Because Windows refused to install properly. The Wi-Fi drivers didn't work, which meant no internet, which meant no setup, which meant Windows just sat there judging me. And to make it even better, the trackpad also didn't work. No Wi-Fi, no trackpad, no hope. Meanwhile, Linux installed flawlessly. Wi-Fi worked instantly. Trackpad worked instantly. No account, no begging, no just one more update. So somehow, the operating system everyone calls hard was the smoothest part of this entire process. At this point, I'm choosing to believe this was a sign to slowly, quietly get away from Windows. Linux is different, and that's fine. Linux Mint is extremely well designed. It's polished, friendly, and clearly built to welcome Windows users with open arms and a warm cup of tea, which is exactly why I don't like it. I don't want comfort, I want problems. I learn best when nothing works, documentation contradicts itself, and I'm 3 terminal commands deep wondering if I just wiped my bootloader. Customization, it's incredible. You can change everything, but the terminal, horrifying. Every command I copy and paste feels like I'm defusing a bomb. I put all my trust into AI. One wrong command and the system is gone, reduced to atoms. On this laptop though, Linux absolutely revived it. It's faster, more responsive, and actually usable again. Windows was clearly holding this thing hostage, but on my main PC, absolutely not. The gaming issues alone were enough to make me back away slowly and pretend this never happened. I edit all my videos on Mac using Final Cut Pro, so I didn't test video editing on Linux. But if you want me to suffer through Linux editing software for content, say the word, and I will bleed for engagement. I'm also in the process of de-googling my life, and Linux feels like the perfect getaway into open source software. That alone could spiral into its own series very easily. So, final verdict, Linux Mint is good. It works, it's stable, it's sane. And that's exactly the problem. It's not for me. Next episode, I'm going deeper. Less polish, more terminal, more chances to completely destroy my system and my sanity. And since this is the first distro in the series, it sets the baseline for the leaderboard, which means Linux Mint is currently in first place purely because it worked. Like and subscribe for more technological adventures, or else Microsoft will place advertisements on your fridge, lock the ice dispenser behind the subscription, and tell you that this feature is coming to Windows 12.